Não narrar. Trilha, melodia suave, melancólica, com toque de mistério e dignidade antiga. I remember the exact moment my daughter's eyes turned cold. It wasn't a sudden snap, more like a slow, deliberate freeze, a chilling frost creeping over a landscape I once thought was warm. It happened at the Sunday lunch table, a tradition we'd held for decades in my home. My home. The very word tastes like ash now, knowing what they planned. I am Arthur, an old man, 82 years young, or so I like to tell myself. But that day, I felt every single one of those years crushing me under their weight. Não narrar. Cena. Vista panorâmica de uma mesa de jantar bem posta, mas com uma atmosfera tensa. Close nos rostos dos personagens, alternando entre a filha, o pai e outros membros da família. The smell of roasted chicken, usually a comfort, hung heavy, almost suffocating. My grandchildren, bless their innocent hearts, were chattering about school. My son-in-law, Mark, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He always did when Sarah, my daughter, was about to launch into one of her big ideas. But this time, it was different. I felt it in my bones. Dad, Sarah began, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. She smiled, but her eyes? Her eyes were fixed on the bay window, where the afternoon sun streamed in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Or perhaps illuminating the price tag she'd already mentally slapped on my life. We need to talk about the house. Now narar. SFX, talheres rozando pratos, subitamente silenciados. The chattering stopped. The clinking of forks on plates ceased. A thick, oppressive silence descended, broken only by the distant hum of traffic outside. My heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I knew this was coming. I'd seen the signs, the subtle nudges, the casual remarks about downsizing or what will happen when, but to hear it so baldly, so bluntly, at my own table, surrounded by my family, it was a punch to the gut. The market is excellent right now, Dad, she continued, oblivious or perhaps indifferent to the tension she'd created. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, a predatory gleam in her gaze. Mark and I have been talking. My business, elite event planning. It's really taking off. We need capital to expand, a big injection of funds. Now narrar. Trilha. A melodia torna-se mais sombria, com notas de apreensão. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. What does that have to do with my home, Sarah? My voice was thin, weaker than I liked. I felt exposed, vulnerable, an old turtle pulled from its shell. She laughed, a short, dismissive sound that grated on my ears. Dad, don't be coy. This house, it's sitting on a gold mine. All this land, the location, it's perfect for redevelopment. A modern condo complex, maybe luxury townhouses. The right buyer would pay a fortune. My gaze drifted around the room. The faded floral wallpaper, chosen by my late wife, Martha, so many years ago. The worn armchair by the fireplace, where I'd read countless stories to Sarah as a child. The scuff marks on the wooden floor, souvenirs of laughter and hurried footsteps. This wasn't just a house. This was a living, breathing history of my family, our history. But I live here, Sarah, I managed to say, stating the obvious as if she'd forgotten. Now narrar, Sina. Close up. Do rosto de Arthur, com os olhos marejados, mas com lampejo de desafio começando a aparecer. She sighed, a theatrical puff of air that conveyed exasperation. Of course, Dad, we'd find you a lovely place, a charming little apartment, or perhaps a nice senior living community with plenty of activities. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance, bills. Think of the freedom. Freedom? I looked at the hands that had built the garden shed, painted these walls, comforted my children. Freedom, she said, as if being stripped of my independence and memories was some kind of gift. My daughter, my flesh and blood, was proposing to evict me, to erase my past, all for her elite event planning empire. The irony was bitter. My life, my legacy, reduced to a business opportunity. My son in law, Mark, finally spoke, his voice tentative. Arthur, we'd make sure you were comfortable. It's a lot of money, you know. Enough for Sarah's business to really take off. And you'd have a nest egg too. No more worries. Worries? I echoed, my voice gaining a little strength, a tremor of indignation. My only worry is losing the only home I've known for 60 years. The home where your mother raised you, Sarah. Where we celebrated every Christmas, every birthday. Where you learned to walk, to ride a bike right out there on that very path. I pointed vaguely towards the back door. Now, narrar, aqui SFX, leve suspiro de dos netos, quase inaudível. One of my grandsons, young Daniel, looked up from his plate, his eyes wide and uncertain. He caught my gaze, and I saw a flicker of understanding, a child's sympathy, before Sarah's sharp voice cut through. Dad, be realistic. It's an old house. It's a drain. The taxes are enormous. The upkeep is constant. You're not getting any younger. What happens when you can't manage it anymore? Who pays for the repairs? Who cleans it? It falls to me, doesn't it? To Mark and me. She slammed her hand lightly on the table, making the silverware jump. It was a calculated gesture, a power play. Não narrar. Trilha. A música fica mais tensa, com sentimento de injustiça. Her words twisted in my gut. A drain. My home. A drain. My life, perhaps. A drain on her ambition. I looked around the table. My other daughter, Emily, was unusually quiet, staring at her plate, avoiding my eyes. My son, Thomas, who lived overseas, wasn't here to defend me. Not that he would. He'd always been Sarah's shadow, agreeing with whatever she decided. I felt a wave of profound loneliness wash over me. I was alone in this, an old man, facing down his own children, who saw him not as a father, but as an obstacle, a means to an end. And what about my memories, Sarah? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Are they also a drain? Are they just clutter to be cleared away for your next big event? Her expression hardened. Memories don't pay bills, Dad. This is a practical matter. We're offering you a comfortable, worry-free future. Think about it. No more stairs. No more yard work. You can travel. Go see Thomas, maybe. The suggestion was galling. Go see Thomas, who barely called, who hadn't visited in 3 years. She wanted me out of the way, neatly packaged and delivered to some convenient location, out of sight, out of mind. Não narrar. Cena. Arthur se levanta lentamente da mesa, a cadeira arrastando pouco no chão. I pushed back my chair, the scrape echoing in the silence. My appetite had vanished. The food on my plate, once inviting, now looked unappetizing. I need a moment, I said, not looking at anyone specifically. I felt a tremor of anger, cold and steady, beginning to replace the initial shock and hurt. Dad, we're not finished discussing this. Sarah's voice followed me. Oh, I think we are, for now, I replied, my back to her. My voice was firmer this time, an edge of steel that even I hadn't expected. I walked slowly towards the living room, towards the old dark oak desk that had belonged to my own father. It sat in the corner, usually just a place for bills and old letters, but in my mind a forgotten thought, a whisper of a memory, had begun to stir. Something about this house, something my father had once told me, years and years ago, when I was just a boy, not long after we moved in. Não narrar. Trilha. a música se torna mais contemplativa, com uma nota de segredo ou descoberta iminente. I stood before the desk, my fingers tracing the carved lion heads. This house. It held more than just my memories. It held secrets. A quiet resolve settled deep within me. They wanted to take my home. They wanted to erase my history. Not without a fight. Not without realizing just how much history this old house truly held. This wasn't just land to be redeveloped. This was something far, far more significant. And they were about to find out. The historic trust. The words floated into my mind, a fragile seed of an idea, ready to sprout into a formidable defense. Não narrar. SFX. Clique suave de uma gaveta sendo aberta, quase imperceptível. I opened the top drawer of the desk, my fingers brushing against old documents, forgotten keepsakes. The seed of an idea was starting to take root, turning into a plan. A quiet, dignified plan that would surprise them all. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was just an old man, easily manipulated, easily dismissed. They were wrong, terribly, terribly wrong. The night was young, and my memory, while sometimes foggy, was beginning to clear on a matter of utmost importance. And tonight, I would start digging. Now narrar. Trilha, melancólica e pensativa, com subtom de crescente determinação. The silence that fell upon the house after Sarah left was heavier than any words exchanged. It pressed down on me, a physical weight in the pit of my stomach. Her laughter, once a joyous sound in these very halls, now echoed like a taunt. I walked from the dining room, the untouched plates still accusing me, into the living room, a space filled with a lifetime of quiet moments. Each armchair seemed to hold a memory. My wife, knitting by the fire. My father reading the evening paper. Children's toys scattered across the rug on a Christmas morning long past. Sarah wanted to turn this into a boutique hotel, a cold, hollow space for strangers, devoid of the warmth that had seeped into its very timbers over generations. Não narrar. Cena. Close-up nas mãos envelhecidas do protagonista, talvez segurando uma foto antiga. I ran my hand over the mantelpiece, tracing the worn wood. My father had built this very mantel with his own hands, a labor of love for my mother. He'd taught me how to sand and varnish, how to feel the grain of the wood beneath my fingertips. Sarah saw only square footage, profit margins. She saw an asset to be liquidated, not a sanctuary steeped in the lives of those who came before her. My heart ached with a deep, unsettling sorrow. It wasn't just the house she threatened. It was my past, my present, and the very idea of a peaceful future. Não narrar. SFX. Notificação do celular vibrando silenciosamente. The next morning brought no respite. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Sarah. A flurry of texts, each one more demanding than the last. Dad, are you thinking about it? Time is of the essence. My investors are getting impatient. This isn't just about me, you know. It's about securing your future, too. Don't you want to see me succeed? It's a huge opportunity, Dad. You'd be helping me realize my dream. Think of the legacy. Legacy. The word felt like a poisoned dart, twisted and used against me. My legacy was this house, its stories, its enduring presence, not some fleeting business venture built on a foundation of greed. Não narrar. Cena. Protagonista. Olhando pela janela, com expressão de cansaço, mas também de desafio. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Each word she typed chipped away at the image I held of my daughter, replacing it with a stranger, a businesswoman, ruthless and calculating. She called, and called again. I let it ring, the insistent vibration a drumbeat of my growing distress. It wasn't a request, it was an order, thinly veiled beneath a veneer of familial concern. She talked about renovation costs, market values, return on investment. Never once did she mention the warmth of the old fireplace, the scent of baking bread from the kitchen, or the echo of children's laughter. This house, to her, was a mere transaction waiting to happen. Não narrar, trilha, tom mais sombrio, com uma nota de crescente tensão. Later that day, she escalated. She started contacting my cousins, my sister, anyone in the family she thought might sway me. I started getting sympathetic yet probing calls. Arthur, Sarah sounds quite desperate. Is everything all right? She said her business is failing. Is there anything you can do to help? The humiliation deepened. My private struggle laid bare for the family to pick apart. Sarah was orchestrating a campaign against me, weaponizing family ties, twisting concern into leverage. The silence from her own mother, my ex-wife, was equally deafening, yet somehow more damning. She had always enabled Sarah, always made excuses. Não narrar. Ah, cena. Protagonista em seu escritório ou em canto tranquilo da casa, abrindo uma gaveta antiga ou álbum de fotos. I sat in my study, a room I rarely used anymore, surrounded by dusty books and forgotten papers. My father's old desk, his scent, faint but still there, in the leather and wood. He had been a man of quiet dignity, a man who valued tradition, continuity. And then a memory stirred, faint at first, then sharper, like a long dormant ember sparking to life. My grandfather. He had been a stickler for details, a man who understood the long game. I remembered a conversation years ago when I was just a boy, sitting on his knee. He spoke of protecting the lineage, of ensuring the house remained a home, not a commodity. Não narrar, stetige-se-sa. Som suave de papel sendo manuseado, talvez uma gaveta abrindo com rangido antigo. He had mentioned something about an old charter, a family pledge. Back then, it meant nothing to me, just the rambling words of an old man. But now, they echoed with profound meaning, a historic trust. Could it be? My father had never spoken of it explicitly, but he had always had a fierce, almost ancestral devotion to this house. He'd resisted every offer from developers over the years, not just with a no, but with a quiet, unyielding finality. Perhaps it wasn't just sentiment guiding him. Não narrar, trilha, tom de misterio e descoberta sutil. A tremor of a new kind, not fear, but a nascent hope, ran through me. I reached for the bottom drawer of the old desk, a drawer I hadn't opened in decades. It was stiff, protesting, but eventually yielded. Inside, beneath old ledgers and faded photographs, lay a small, heavy wooden box. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid. The smell of aged paper and cedar wood filled the air. There it was, a bundle of documents, tied with a faded ribbon, old, official-looking papers, brittle and yellowed with time. At the top, in elegant looping script, was a title, Deed of Trust, Elmwood Manor, Não narrar, Cena, Close-up no documentos antigos, talvez selo em relevo. My hands trembled as I carefully unfurled the first document. The language was dense, archaic, full of legal jargon from a bygone era. But the gist of it began to form a clear picture in my mind. This house, my beloved home, wasn't just mine to sell. It was a protected entity. My ancestors, long ago, had foreseen a time when avarice might threaten the family seat. They had established a historic preservation trust, binding the property, ensuring it would forever remain a private residence, passed down through the generations, never to be sold for commercial gain. It was a shield, forged in the past, against the very attack I was now facing. Não narrar, trilha, música muda para crescendo silencioso de poder e alívio. A profound sense of calm settled over me, replacing the gnawing despair. Sarah's relentless calls, her manipulative texts, her attempts to rally the family against me, they suddenly seemed inconsequential. She thought she held all the cards. She thought my sentimentality was a weakness she could exploit. But my ancestors, with their foresight and their unwavering love for this land, had provided me with an unexpected, unassailable defense. The weapon she wielded was flimsy. Mine was carved from generations of foresight and ironclad legal standing. I sat there, reading through the documents, the words taking on a new, powerful meaning. I felt a connection to those who came before me, a silent communion across time. They had entrusted me with this legacy, and I would not fail them, not for Sarah's failing business, not for her greed. The truth, this profound, historic truth, was a secret I had unknowingly carried for years. Now it was time to reveal it, to face her, not with pleas or arguments, but with an unyielding fact. I knew what I had to do. I just needed to choose the right moment, the right setting, to deliver this silent, dignified blow. The next evening, Sarah called again, demanding an answer, and I knew exactly what I would tell her. Now narrar, trilha, melancólica e pensativa, com um toque de mistério. That night, the house felt colder. Every creak in the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside, seemed to carry Clara's words. "Sell your home, Dad, for my business." It echoed in the silence of my bedroom, robbing me of sleep. I lay there, staring at the familiar ceiling, a canvas of shadows dancing with the streetlight. This house wasn't just wood and brick. It was every breath I'd taken since I was a boy, every scraped knee, every first kiss, every tear shed, and every laughter shared within these walls. Now narrar, SFX, relógio antigo, tic-tac, baixo y constante. I remembered Clara, a tiny thing, tracing the patterns on the wallpaper in the living room, her small hands smudging the glass of the front window, gazing out at the world. She loved this house then, or so I thought. She would run through the garden, pretending to be a princess, guarding her castle. This house was her castle too once. Now it was just an asset, commodity to be liquidated for her latest venture, whatever it might be. She hadn't even bothered to explain the specifics, only that it was a can't-miss opportunity for her. The weight of her demand pressed down on me, a physical ache in my chest. How could she speak of selling my home so casually? The home that held generations of memories, where her own grandmother had planted the rose bushes, now overgrown by the porch. It was sacrilege. But how do you fight your own flesh and blood? How do you stand against a wave of perceived progress when it's crashing down from someone you once loved unconditionally? Não narrar. Sina, close-up na mão enrugada do narrador, apertando lençol de linho antigo. The next morning brought no relief. The sunlight, usually a cheerful visitor, felt intrusive. It highlighted the dust motes dancing in the air, the faint cracks in the plaster that told stories of shifting foundations and long lives lived. I wandered from room to room, touching the cold mantelpiece, running my hand over the worn kitchen counter. Each object held a story, a fragment of my life. This wasn't just a house. It was me. It was my legacy, my history, my very identity. A text message vibrated my phone on the kitchen table. It was Clara. "Dad, just checking in. Any thoughts on our discussion? The investor meeting is next month. Time is of the essence. Time is of the essence." It felt like a ticking clock, counting down not to a business deal, but to my own displacement. She hadn't even given me a moment to breathe, to process. She saw a house. I saw a life, and she wanted to erase it. Não narrar. Trilha, mais sombria, com tom de urgência. I didn't reply. I couldn't. What could I say? No, Clara, you can't have my memories. No, Clara, you can't strip away everything I hold dear. It would be met with accusations of being sentimental, stuck in the past. Holding her back. Her words from the dinner table still rang in my ears. It's an old house, Dad. You're alone here. It's too much for you. Too much? It was my comfort, my sanctuary. Days blurred into a haze of internal conflict. I'd sit in my armchair, the one my father used to read the newspaper in, and try to think. What options did I have? I wasn't rich. My pension covered my needs, but hardly enough to buy a new home. Certainly not one with the character and history of this place. And where would I go? A sterile apartment, a faceless retirement community where my past would be locked away in boxes, never to be revisited? The thought made my stomach churn. Then, one evening, as I was absently dusting the old bookshelf in my study, my fingers brushed against a worn, leather-bound volume. It was a local history book, published by the Historical Society decades ago. I remembered my grandfather, a meticulous man with a passion for local lore, flipping through its pages, pointing out old photographs. "This house," he'd said, his voice imbued with pride. "It's seen so much, more than just our family." Now narrar. SFX. Suave. Arrastar de livro antigo de uma prateleira. Poeira suspensa. I pulled the book down, a fine cloud of dust rising around it. My eyes scanned the index, searching for any mention of my street, my address. And there it was, a small entry. The Ashworth House. My house. It mentioned its unique architectural style, its survival through 2 world wars, its original owner, a prominent figure in the town's early days. But what truly caught my eye was a line, almost an afterthought, in a paragraph detailing a local preservation initiative from the early 1970s. Several significant properties, including the Ashworth House, were recognized for their historical value and placed under a voluntary protective covenant, safeguarding their heritage for future generations. A voluntary protective covenant. The words swam before my eyes. Could it be true? Could this dusty old book hold the key? My grandfather had never explicitly mentioned it to me. Perhaps it was just a local honor, a nod to its age, nothing legally binding. Or perhaps it was something more. My heart, which had felt like a heavy stone for days, fluttered with a tiny, almost imperceptible spark of hope. Now narrar, cena, close-up nos olhos do narrador, focados y ligeramente widened con descoberta. I spent the rest of the evening poring over the book, then other old documents I could find, deeds, land surveys, a thick folder of papers related to my parents' inheritance of the house. Nothing jumped out immediately, but the memory of that phrase, protective covenant, kept resurfacing. It felt like a whisper from the past, a forgotten safeguard. I needed to understand what it meant. What kind of protection? And was it still in effect? I knew I couldn't ask Clara, or anyone else in the family. The moment I breathed a word of this, it would either be dismissed as an old man's fantasy, or, worse, seen as an obstacle she would immediately try to dismantle. This had to be my secret, my own quiet investigation. It was a faint glimmer, but it was my glimmer. The next morning, instead of wallowing in dread, I felt a flicker of purpose, a quiet determination. I brewed my coffee, the scent familiar and comforting, and then I pulled out my old address book. It had names and numbers long forgotten, people I hadn't spoken to in years. But one name stood out. Arthur Hemlock. He used to be the town clerk, a man who knew every piece of paper, every dusty record in this town's history. He'd be old now if he was still around, but he was my first lead, my only lead, and a sliver of hope. Não narrar. Trilha esperançosa, mas ainda incerta, com crescendo suave de determinação. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. This wasn't just about my home anymore. It was about proving to myself, and perhaps to Clara, that I wasn't just some old man to be swept aside, that I had strength, and that this house had a voice, a history that deserved to be heard. The phone rang once, twice, three times, echoing in the quiet house. I held my breath, waiting. Não narrar, trilha, tensão suave, crescente, com notas de melancolia e determinação. Eco de velhas memórias, quase lamento silencioso. My mind replayed the lawyer's words from a few days prior. Mr. Davis' voice, a calm, steady anchor in a sea of my own turbulent thoughts. Mr. Davis, a man with kind eyes and a surprisingly firm handshake for his age, had leaned back in his worn leather chair, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across his office. Mr. Thompson, this historic preservation trust, it's ironclad, he'd stated, tapping a delicate finger on the embossed seal of the brittle, yellow document, the original trust agreement from 1898. It means the house cannot be sold, demolished, or even significantly altered without the express, unanimous approval of the Trust's board. And their primary objective, as explicitly outlined in the original charter, is to maintain the historical integrity of the property, not, I assure you, to facilitate a quick sale for commercial development. A strange, almost overwhelming mix of profound relief and a heavy, leaden burden settled in my chest simultaneously. Relief because my home, my sanctuary, the very bedrock of my existence and identity was legally untouchable. The weight of generations, of countless cherished memories, of my entire life suddenly felt protected by an unseen legal fortress. But the burden, that was the chilling, undeniable knowledge of the storm brewing, the unyielding, relentless force that was my daughter, Sarah. I knew this wouldn't be an easy victory, not a quiet triumph. It would be a battle, not in the sterile confines of a courtroom, but in the heart of my home, at my own kitchen table, where family was supposed to gather in love, not in greed. Sarah didn't give up easily. She never had. Even as a child, if she set her sights on a new, expensive toy, she'd employ a relentless campaign of calculated persuasion, crocodile tears, and eventually a quiet, stubborn insistence that wore down anyone's resistance. Now, it was my house, my heritage, my very peace she wanted, and her methods, honed over decades, had grown sharper, more insidious, designed to chip away at my resolve, piece by agonizing piece. Within days of my clandestine meeting with Mr. Davies, my phone became a relentless instrument of her pressure campaign. It wasn't just her calls anymore. First, my grandson, Michael, a well-meaning but tragically easily influenced young man, currently struggling to find his own footing after university. Grandpa, he'd started, his voice a little too bright, a little too rehearsed. Sarah told me all about her amazing new business. It's truly revolutionary, she says. And she just needs a little bit of capital to really take off, to make her dreams and ours come true. From the house, she said, it's just sitting there, not really doing anything, is it? His words stung, a casual dismissal of a century of life. Não narrar, já XFX. Telefone vibrando e campainha, tocando em momentos de silêncio na narração, sutilmente, como ruídos de fundo da pressão. Then came my niece, Clara, Sarah's cousin, usually so kind and empathetic. Her voice on the phone was strained, clearly uncomfortable. Uncle John, Sarah's really trying to make something of herself, you know? It's incredibly hard out there for entrepreneurs. And you have this big, old house. Maybe it's time to let it go. For the family? for Sarah's future, and in turn, for all of ours? Each call was a subtle probe, a carefully crafted message, designed to make me feel overwhelmingly guilty, selfish, an ancient, immovable obstacle to progress and prosperity. They saw no soul in its old timbers, no echo of laughter in its quiet halls, only square footage and market value. I tried to explain, gently, patiently, trying to appeal to their better natures, to the fading memory of a different kind of family. This house, Michael, Clara, it's not just bricks and mortar. It's a part of our family's history. It's where your great-grandmother baked her famous apple pies, where your mother took her first steps, where countless Christmases were celebrated. And it's not just mine to sell. There are complications, legal intricacies, but their voices were dismissive, already thoroughly convinced by Sarah's expertly spun narrative. My home was just an asset, a giant piggy bank waiting to be cracked open to fund her ambition. Their glazed-over expressions, even over the phone, were palpable. The pressure escalated dramatically when Sarah herself arrived, unannounced, on a crisp Tuesday morning. I was in the garden, meticulously pruning my climbing roses, their vibrant crimson petals a burst of defiant beauty against the encroaching chill of autumn. The wrought iron gate creaked open, its familiar groan suddenly sounding ominous, and there she stood, a stark silhouette against the harsh morning sun. Dressed in a sharp, almost aggressively tailored business suit, a gleaming, expensive tablet clutched in her hand like a digital weapon, ready to deploy fact and figures. "Father," she began, her tone a forced pleasantness that felt like sandpaper against my raw nerves. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, which were already calculating. "We need to talk. Seriously. This is about more than just my business now. It's about the family's future. Our collective future as a unit." Não narrar. Cena. Elder no jardim. Sarah aparece com uma postura de negócios inflexível. O sol da manhã ilumina a cena de forma fria. She walked right past my prize-winning hybrid tea roses, those delicate treasures I'd nurtured for decades, barely sparing a glance at their intricate beauty, their rich, complex fragrance. Her eyes, instead, were already scanning the house, dissecting its facade, calculating its market value, openly envisioning its swift demolition, the construction of something new, something modern, something profitable. "I've done more research, Father. Extensive research. The market is absolutely red hot right now. A seller's dream. We could get a fortune for this place. A truly life-changing sum. Think about it. Enough for you to live comfortably in a beautiful, brand new, modern condo. No more endless back-breaking yard work. No more drafty old rooms that cost a fortune to heat and maintain. A fresh start for everyone." We moved inside, at her insistence, to the kitchen. She laid out spreadsheets on my antique mahogany kitchen table, the very table where we'd had that fateful, humiliating dinner, where she'd first delivered her demand. Rows of stark, unfeeling numbers, intricate projections of profit margins, intimidating charts showing exponential growth curves. It was all so impersonal, so cold. It lacked any warmth, any understanding, any empathy for what this house truly meant to me. It reduced my life, my history, to mere digits. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at a figure on the glossy screen, a number that seemed impossibly large, yet utterly meaningless to me. "This, Father, is your share, your personal, substantial share. More than enough to buy a luxurious apartment in the city, pay for a full-time caregiver if you ever need one, travel the world for years, indulging every whim. Imagine no more worries, just pure freedom, comfort and security." My worries weren't about luxury or travel or carefree living. My worries were about the imminent loss of my home, the eradication of my memories, the shattering of my very identity. I looked out the window, at the grand old oak tree my father had planted when I was a boy, at the faint enduring indentation in the lawn where the swing set used to stand, where Sarah herself, as a gap-toothed child, had shrieked with unbridled joy. Sarah, I said, my voice barely a whisper, thick with the weight of years and unspoken pain. This house is not just money. It holds generations. It holds our history. It holds my life. She sighed, a theatrical puff of air that conveyed her utter exasperation, her complete inability to grasp my perspective, or perhaps her unwillingness to even try. Father, please, you're being utterly, stubbornly sentimental. This is business. This is opportunity. You're holding us back. You're holding me back. My investors are waiting. They won't wait forever. Their patience, like mine, is finite. The entitlement in her voice was like a physical blow, a sudden, sharp impact to my chest. She truly believed I owed her this. My home, my life savings, my entire future, all to be sacrificed for her grand, selfish venture. Não narrar. Trilha. Intensidade crescente. Notas de tristeza e indignação. Som de piano grave e solitário, quase presságio. Then came the thinly veiled threats. Subtle at first, like shadows creeping in from the corners of the room, growing longer, darker. If you refuse to cooperate, Father, I might have to reconsider things. My commitments to you, the time I spend driving out here every week, sacrificing my own precious time, the little errands I run, the appointments I manage. You know, these things take energy and money, and if my business, which could secure your comfortable future, fails because of a lack of initial capital, well, who knows what kind of pressure that puts on a family, on your future care. She hinted at future care needs, at my perceived dependency, at the potential, calculated withdrawal of her support, leaving me vulnerable, isolated, and utterly alone. I gripped the edge of the antique mahogany table, my knuckles white, the intricate grain of the wood pressing deep into my skin. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about absolute control, about stripping me of my autonomy, my very worth as an individual. It was about erasure. But I had my secret, a powerful, legally watertight shield I was carefully preparing to deploy. I just needed the right moment, the moment of maximum impact and minimum damage to my own internal peace of mind. I needed to act, not out of anger, but out of principle, out of a profound sense of duty to my ancestors and to myself. I decided to seek a second, unofficial opinion. I called my old friend Arthur, who had retired after a long distinguished career as a superior court judge. He was a man of immense integrity, with a sharp, clear mind, and a deeply compassionate heart. I needed to talk, to hear a seasoned perspective beyond the legal specifics Mr. Davis had provided. We met for coffee at our usual spot, a quiet, unassuming cafe downtown, tucked away from prying eyes and the ever-present family gossip. Arthur, I began, after ordering our customary 2 black coffees and a single generously sized blueberry muffin to share, a ritual we'd maintained for decades. I'm in a predicament, one that's testing the very limits of my patience, and, I must admit, my dwindling faith in the true meaning of family. He listened patiently, his wise, crinkled eyes never leaving mine, as I recounted Sarah's relentless demands, the pressure from Michael and Clara, and then the astonishing rediscovery of the historic trust. I laid out the details of the documents, the meticulous research Mr. Davies had done, the confirmation of its active status. "So you have the documentation, John?" he asked, stirring his coffee slowly, his expression thoughtful, serious. The original deeds, the trust agreement itself, the undeniable signatures, and the current legal confirmation from a reputable lawyer? Yes, I confirmed, a sense of quiet, almost defiant triumph warming me despite the knot of anxiety in my stomach. All confirmed by Mr. Davies. It was established by my great grandfather, Elias Thompson, way back in 1898, a specific, unequivocal condition for his substantial donation to the city's historical society. He loved this house, Arthur, as much as I do. He saw it not just as a home, but as a living, breathing piece of the city's irreplaceable heritage. Não narrar. Cena. Elder e Arthur em um café, conversando em voz baixa. A luz suave da manhã entra pela janela, iluminando seus rostos pensativos. Arthur nodded slowly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips, a twinkle of admiration in his eyes. That's a very strong hand you hold, John, a very strong hand indeed, ironclad, as your lawyer said. Sarah won't be able to touch it, not legally. And if she tries to challenge it, if she dares to take this to court, she'll be facing the full formidable weight of a well-established historic preservation trust, an entity with significant legal resources, a public image to uphold, and a mission to protect its assets. Not just an old man she believes she can easily intimidate and manipulate. His words, delivered with such calm, unwavering authority, bolstered my flagging resolve, cementing my decision. It wasn't just my personal battle anymore. It was a battle for history, for legacy, for the very profound idea that some things are infinitely more valuable than a quick opportunistic profit. It was a stand against the soulless commodification of heritage, against the erosion of everything that held meaning. But the thought of confronting Sarah, of witnessing the inevitable volcanic rage in her eyes when she realized her carefully constructed plan, her entire audacious scheme was utterly foiled, filled me with a familiar, aching dread. The thought of losing her completely, even if she was already lost to me in so many fundamental ways, was a deep, persistent ache in my soul. I knew I couldn't delay much longer. The pressure was mounting, becoming not just unbearable, but actively toxic. She'd started bringing up market comparables from glossy real estate listings for new, characterless builds, and even brazenly sent me brochures for sleek, impersonal assisted living facilities with smiling, generic faces. "Just looking out for your future, father," she'd texted, a passive-aggressive poison dart that struck deep, intended to undermine my confidence, to make me question my own capacity to live independently, thinking about what's best for you, long term, for your comfort and safety. Não narrar. SFX, notificação de mensagem no celular, som seco, intrusivo e metálico. That text was the last straw. A cold, hard resolve solidified within me. I couldn't let her humiliate me further. I couldn't let her continue to treat me as a senile, easily manipulated old man, a burden to be shifted aside. It was time to reveal the truth, not in anger, not with a triumphant sneer, but with quiet dignity, with the gravitas of a man protecting his sacred ground. I knew, deep down, that she wouldn't understand. She would see it as a monumental betrayal, not as a necessary act of preservation. She would see it as me deliberately withholding what she felt she was unequivocally owed. But I had to do it. For myself, for the house, for Elias, my great-grandfather, whose foresight had saved it. I spent the next few days meticulously organizing my documents, almost as a ritual. The original deed, its parchment yellowed with age, but miraculously perfectly preserved. The trust agreement, a masterpiece of precise legal language from a bygone era, detailed and unassailable. The official, crisp letter from Mr. Davies, confirming the trust's active binding status, and its profound implications. I placed them all carefully, almost reverently, in a neat leather-bound folder, the same folder I used to keep my father's old war letters, a collection of equally precious, equally vulnerable history. It was ready. I decided the next Sunday lunch would be the moment. Our family, or what remained of it, always gathered at my house for Sunday lunch, a tradition Sarah had tried repeatedly, cunningly, to discontinue, claiming it was too much work for me, too much hassle for a man my age. But I had always stubbornly insisted. It was my house, it was my tradition, and this time, at that very table, it would be my stage for the undeniable, unvarnished truth. Não narrar. Trilha. Música torna-se mais resoluta, mas ainda com uma nota de melancolia pensativa, uma sensação de inevitabilidade, tamborilar discreto, como batidas de coração. I imagined the scene vividly, almost like a rehearsal in my mind. The usual clinking of forks against porcelain plates, the low murmuring hum of conversations that would, inevitably, drift towards Sarah's brilliant business plan and her need for capital. Sarah, no doubt, would try to steer the conversation back to my supposed financial responsibility and family investment, perhaps even hinting at my stubbornness, my resistance to progress, to the other relatives. But this time I would be prepared. This time I would hold the ultimate, definitive word. The thought sent a profound shiver down my spine. Not a shiver of fear, but one of anticipation, of a quiet, righteous power. It wouldn't be easy. She would fight, perhaps viciously. She would rage, undoubtedly. But I had the truth on my side, and the law. It was a heavy weight, this secret, this truth I held. But it was also an impenetrable shield, forged by my ancestors, now wielded by me, an old man defending his heritage. I polished the old mahogany table until its surface gleamed, a deep, rich sheen, reflecting the quiet afternoon light in my living room. It was the same table where my great-grandfather Elias had reportedly signed the original trust documents, a silent, enduring testament to his foresight and profound love for this home, for this land. Its polished surface now reflected my aging face, etched with worry. Yes, but now also with a new flicker of fierce defiance, a quiet strength I hadn't known I still possessed. This house had stood for over a century. It had weathered many storms, 2 world wars, economic depressions, personal tragedies, shifting social tides. It would weather this one too. My heart ached with a profound, almost unbearable sadness for the family I once had, a family that truly valued heritage, genuine connection, and mutual respect more than just fleeting financial gain. But that family, that idealized vision, seemed utterly lost, replaced by a calculating opportunism, a cold, unwavering self-interest that chilled me to the bone. I had to protect what remained, protect my home, protect my memories, protect my dignity, and perhaps by doing so, protect a small vital piece of our shared history from being erased irrevocably. Não narrar. Cena. Elder sozinho, olhando para a pasta de documentos, reflexivo. Close na pasta de couro, na mesa de madeira polida. A luz da tarde incide sobre ela. The leather-bound folder lay on my desk, solid and reassuring. A silent promise. A promise of protection. A promise of eventual peace. But before peace, there would be a storm. A tempest of Sarah's making, fueled by her naked ambition and her inevitable furious disappointment. I knew with absolute certainty what I had to do. The path was clear, though fraught with immense emotional peril. The next Sunday, at that very table, surrounded by my family, I would finally speak, and the truth, like a long dormant volcano, would finally erupt. Não narrar. Trilha. Música suavemente termina com uma nota de antecipação e um pouco de apreensão, um crescendo sutil, antes de um final abrupto, mas pensativo. Não narrar. Trilha. Tensão silenciosa, persistente, mas com um toque de melancolia. Ela se recusava a acreditar. Mesmo depois que meu advogado enviou a cópia autenticada do contrato de fideicomisso histórico, ela ainda ligava. Seus argumentos eram como um disco riscado, a mesma melodia desafinada de "minha empresa precisa disso", "você não está me ajudando", "o que as pessoas vão pensar?". Eu não atendia mais às chamadas que não eram da minha neta. Ela sabia que eu não cederia. A paz que eu sentia ao saber que minha casa estava realmente segura, intocável, era um bálsamo para minha alma. Não narrar. SFX. Telefone tocando, abafado, depois silêncio. Ela tentou um último ataque, um encontro familiar que cheirava a cozinha emboscada. "Pai, só quero conversar, em paz, como família. Por favor, venha almoçar no domingo." A voz dela era doce, quase suplicante, diferente do tom imperativo que eu conhecia. Era a voz que ela usava quando queria algo, a voz que havia me enganado tantas vezes no passado. Mas desta vez eu estava preparado. Não narrar. Cena. Uma mesa de almoço elegante, mas tensa. O protagonista está em silêncio, observando. Cheguei no domingo e a mesa estava posta com o melhor serviço. O cheiro de assado no ar. Minha neta, Clara, me abraçou forte, seus olhos transmitindo um pedido mudo de desculpas por sua mãe. Meu genro estava lá, cabisbaixo, parecendo desconfortável, e minha filha, sentada à cabeceira da mesa, um sorriso forçado colado no rosto. "Pai, que bom que veio", ela disse, gesticulando para meu lugar. Era o mesmo lugar de sempre, o mesmo lugar onde ela tentou me forçar a vender tudo. Eu me sentei, observei o prato à minha frente, o pedaço de carne que parecia pesado. Ela começou a falar, primeiro sobre coisas triviais, tentando criar uma atmosfera de normalidade. Mas eu podia ver a impaciência em seus olhos, a maneira como ela tamborilava os dedos na toalha de mesa quando pensava que ninguém estava olhando. Não narrar. CFX. Talheres tilintando, suavemente. "Pai", ela finalmente começou, o tom mudando para algo mais sério. "Eu estive pensando, talvez haja uma maneira de todos nós sairmos ganhando. E se você vendesse apenas uma parte do terreno, aquela porção dos fundos que você nem usa tanto, eu poderia construir meu escritório lá, e o resto da casa continuaria sendo sua." A mentira escorria de sua boca como mel falso. Ela sabia que o trust abrangia a propriedade inteira, cada centímetro quadrado. Eu olhei para ela, meus olhos fixos nos dela. Não havia raiva em mim, apenas uma profunda tristeza. "Helena", eu disse, minha voz calma, "você sabe que isso não é possível. O trust protege toda a propriedade. Não posso dividir, não posso vender. É o que o documento diz, é o que a lei diz." Ela revirou os olhos. "A lei? Pai, você está sendo ridículo. É a sua casa. Você é o proprietário. Certamente há uma cláusula, um jeito de contornar isso." Não narrar. Trilha. A tensão aumenta um pouco. Meu genro pigarreou, tentando intervir. "Helena, o advogado do seu pai foi bem claro. O trust é irrefutável. É para a preservação histórica. Não é um contrato de venda comum." Ele parecia querer desaparecer sob a mesa. Clara, minha neta, tocou minha mão suavemente. "Vovô, mamãe só está tentando entender." Eu balancei a cabeça. "Não, Clara. Sua mãe não está tentando entender. Ela está tentando encontrar uma brecha onde não há nenhuma. Ela está tentando desrespeitar o legado da minha família, o propósito deste trust e a minha vontade. De novo." A última palavra pairou no ar, pesada. Minha filha bateu a mão na mesa e o copo de água tremeu. "É ridículo! Você está me impedindo de realizar meu sonho. por uma casa velha, cheia de poeira e memórias de fantasmas. O que você ganha com isso, pai? O que você ganha em me ver fracassar? Não narrar. Cena. Close-up no rosto do protagonista, seus olhos expressando cansaço, mas também determinação. O que eu ganhava? Eu ganhava paz. Ganhava o respeito que ela havia tentado me tirar. Ganhava o direito de terminar meus dias no lugar que amei e protegi. Eu ganho a minha dignidade, Helena, eu disse, minha voz baixa, mas firme. E a certeza de que a casa dos seus avós e dos seus bisavós não será transformada em um escritório de business coaching para clientes que você nunca viu na vida. Houve um silêncio sepulcral. Meu genro olhava para o prato. Clara estava com os olhos mareados, olhando para a mãe. Helena ficou em pé, o rosto vermelho. Então é isso, não é? Você me escolheu de novo. Você escolheu essa casa morta, acima da sua própria filha. Não, Helena, eu respondi, olhando para ela com uma clareza que só o cansaço pode trazer. Eu escolhi honrar uma promessa que fiz à sua mãe antes que ela se fosse, uma promessa de que este lugar seria protegido. E eu escolhi a mim mesmo, a minha paz, o meu lar. Não narrar. SFX, cadeira sendo arrastada, rangendo. Eu me levantei, peguei meu casaco. O almoço, claro, estava arruinado. Não há mais nada a dizer sobre isso, Helena, e não haverá. Ela me olhou com um ódio frio. Você vai se arrepender, pai. Você vai se arrepender de me virar as costas. Eu apenas balancei a cabeça. Não havia arrependimento em mim. Havia apenas uma dor silenciosa pelo que minha filha havia se tornado, e um alívio imenso por não ter cedido. Enquanto caminhava para a porta, pude ouvir Clara sussurrando algo para a mãe, mas não pude discernir as palavras. A porta se fechou atrás de mim, e o silêncio do meu próprio carro foi o som mais doce que ouvi o dia todo. Não narrar. Trilha. Música suavemente esperançosa, mas ainda com um toque de reflexão, enquanto o protagonista volta para casa. Voltei para minha casa, a casa que ela queria tanto destruir. Abri a porta e o cheiro de madeira velha, de livros empoeirados, de flores secas, me envolveu. Era o cheiro da minha vida, da minha família, da minha história. Não havia fantasmas ali, apenas ecos de amor e de memórias preciosas. Percorri os cômodos, tocando as paredes, os móveis. Cada rachadura, cada arranhão contava uma história. E essa história, eu sabia, continuaria, porque eu a protegi. A revelação do Trust não foi apenas uma arma legal, foi um divisor de águas. Foi o momento em que recuperei minha voz, meu poder e meu lar. Minha filha se afastou, mergulhada em sua própria raiva e ressentimento. As chamadas cessaram. Não foi a vitória estrondosa que alguns talvez imaginassem, mas foi a vitória silenciosa e profunda de um homem que se recusou a ser apagado. Não narrar. Cena. O protagonista sentado em sua poltrona favorita, lendo um livro, uma xícara de chá ao lado. Um raio de sol entra pela janela. Hoje, sento-me em minha sala, lendo meus livros, ouvindo o tic-tac suave do relógio antigo que pertenceu à minha avó. A casa é minha fortaleza, meu santuário. As janelas abertas permitem que a brisa traga o cheiro das flores do jardim. O jardim que minha mãe plantou e que eu cuidei com tanto carinho. Ninguém mais me perturba com propostas de venda, com projetos de expansão. A paz é um luxo que, na velhice, se torna uma necessidade vital, e eu a conquistei de volta. Não com gritos ou ameaças, mas com a quietude de uma verdade incontestável. Minha vida não é mais definida pelo que minha filha exige, mas pelo que eu escolho proteger. Não narrar. Trilha, música um pouco mais edificante, mas ainda com a melancolia da reflexão, caminhando para um final inspirador. E assim, a vida continua, um dia de cada vez. As memórias permanecem, tanto as doces quanto as amargas. Mas agora, as doces prevalecem. A casa respira comigo. E o legado dos meus antepassados está seguro, pelo menos por enquanto, sob o meu teto. Esta é a minha história. Uma história de um pai que se viu confrontado pela ganância da própria filha, mas que encontrou a força para se defender e proteger o que mais importava. Muitos de nós, mais velhos, passamos por provações semelhantes, não é? Tentativas de desvalorizar nossa experiência, nosso patrimônio, nossa própria existência. Não narrar. Trilha. Música finaliza suavemente, permitindo espaço para a voz do narrador. Eu me pergunto, você já se sentiu assim? Alguém tentou tomar algo precioso de você, sob o pretexto de ajuda ou oportunidade? Se esta história tocou você de alguma forma, por favor, deixe um gostei no vídeo. Seu apoio me ajuda a compartilhar mais histórias como esta. E eu adoraria saber nos comentários. Qual foi o momento em que você se sentiu mais forte, mais firme, diante de uma situação difícil com a família? Ou qual conselho você daria a alguém que está passando por algo parecido? Compartilhe suas experiências. E se você ainda não faz parte da nossa comunidade, considere se inscrever para não perder as próximas histórias de resiliência e justiça. Cuidem-se.